1996 stands today as one of the most pivotal years in video game history, with dozens of A+ games released one after another. It's hard to call any one of them flat out the best. One of these was not only great, but also influential in many ways, giving a face to the Sony PlayStation and jump-starting a U-turn for American video game development. That game is Crash Bandicoot. Buckle up for a fun ride. On September 9th, 1996, Sony Computer Entertainment released Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation in the US. Crash was a major hit that year, standing out as a comedic, character-driven game on the Sony PlayStation that just also happened to be American-made. A mix of things that seemed strange all those years ago, but are more than commonplace today. It was one of the few games at the time that turned the tide back to American home video game development. The ebb and flow of creative control that really goes back to the very beginning. In the early 70s, the center of the gaming universe, however small, was Southern California. There, Atari led the way with innovative arcade games and the mighty Atari VCS, later renamed the 2600. Others got on the bandwagon as the industry grew and grew. By the time the 80s came around, the 2600 was very outdated. Many saw greener pastures in home computers, which were more advanced and offered higher profit margins on hardware and software. Success stories include Lucasfilm Games, Electronic Arts, Epix, and Sierra Online. It's not that TV games went away, it's just that Atari was supplanted by Nintendo. The Japanese company brought their family computer to America in 1985 as the NES. The low cost of entry and fast-paced games were more than enough for the kids in America to stay connected to the TV. The dominance of Nintendo and the NES reoriented the landscape. Games were made almost exclusively in Japan, and with it came a certain frame of mind that Nintendo games were the only real games, and games made in Japan were the only ones worth playing. Even though an older, more sophisticated, and certainly richer cohort would strongly disagree. At the start of the 90s, the dominance of Nintendo began to wane. The NES found itself outdated against new 16-bit machines like the Sega Genesis. The jumping graphical performance was enough to turn heads, but it still required great games to bring customers over. Recognizable faces were licensed out. The marketing did its best to position Sega, the Genesis, and its games in a way Americans could connect with. A huge leap over the cheesy 80s ads of the past, though everything seen through the prism of time can feel awkward. Sega of America also established their own studio with the intent of producing more homegrown games. They enlisted Mark Cerny, a man who had developed a few Master System games, to run the department. He had put things in place at STI, though he left the company soon afterwards, winding up at Universal Interactive Studios in charge of product development. Universal was simply movie people looking to get into games. But they had a reason to jump on the bandwagon. Electronic Arts, one of the biggest American software companies, had spun off a new division run by its founder, Trip Hawkins, to create a new gaming format, the 3DO. Released in 1993, the 3DO was more advanced than anything Sega or Nintendo had at the time, and the company offered higher royalties than the big two. In Trip's own words, the future is here. To help boost the 3DO, Trip offered some free development kits to a small outfit called Naughty Dog, which had developed a few games under Electronic Arts. At the time, Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin were running the company and were basically the only employees. With the 3DO kit, they developed a fighting game, Way of the Warrior. Andy and Jason crossed paths with Mark Cerny at just the right time. They were able to iron out a deal that brought Naughty Dog on board with Universal, which published Way of the Warrior, securing a multi-game contract in the process. The 3DO was a bold move within the gaming industry, but many games were critically panned as mere interactive movies, lacking the substance of the best-selling Super NES and Genesis titles. Japanese game development still reigned supreme, and rightly so. But Nintendo was about to show that there were Western games worth their weight in gold. In 1994, the Big N published Donkey Kong Country, developed by Rare. Though not an American company, they were British. Through the lens of Japan versus the world, that was close enough. It was declared the best game of 1994 by EGM, and behind the scenes, it forced the president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, to admit that a non-Japanese developer could create an amazing game. All of these events took place under the shadow of Sony, which was also entering the gaming industry with the PlayStation at the end of 1994. The company opened the coffers to acquire talent around the world. One of the first contracts signed for the PlayStation was with Universal and Naughty Dog. It's where the story of Crash Bandicoot begins, at the end of a long, winding road that it didn't even know it was on.
Fear not, plumber boy, the Bandicoot will come. I'm coming to get you, pal. Hi, how are you? Am I on the right street? Can you tell me where Nintendo is? People run a lot here. This is really nice. Plumber boy, your time has come.
Work between Naughty Dog, Universal, and Sony began in earnest in mid-1994. The PlayStation had yet to go on sale. Some demonstrations of what the machine could do were shown to the public, but the reception was rather cold. Sony had no established presence in gaming. With the 3DO and other imitators, there was a resistance to any big corporation throwing around money and flooding the market with interactive multimedia, a buzzword that meant nothing. Gaming magazines even panned the start button of the controller for being shaped like the play button of a CD player. Sony faced an uphill battle from the start. Naughty Dog were given much creative freedom. This let Andy and Jason explore different possibilities for what their first PlayStation game should be. They had thought about several different genres, but eventually settled on a style similar to Donkey Kong Country, with an emphasis on 3D gameplay. Jungle themes and a cast of animal characters left the door open to many creative and comedic possibilities. This also addressed an issue that many felt was a hindrance for the PlayStation: the lack of a character like Mario or Sonic to represent the machine. Sony never embraced the idea, presenting the PlayStation as part of a home entertainment system, like their VCRs and CD players. As Naughty Dog went ahead with the concept of a Donkey Kong Country-style game in 3D, they learned that was easier said than done. Something like the half-pipe special stages of Sonic 2 were thought of as 3D in 1992, even though the character was only moving left and right. Games that allowed true 3D movement were mostly first-person shooters. Nothing wrong with that, but it would never work when aping Donkey Kong Country. 3D games with a third-person view also had the problem of rarely, if ever, seeing the character in profile or directly head-on. Not to mention the various ways to move around in a 3D space, none of which were perfect. The problem gave the first Naughty Dog PlayStation game an amusing working title. Kids, cover your ears. Sonic's ASS. Beyond that, what would the character be? Cartoonish animals were all the rage in the 90s. Arrow the Acrobat, Alfred Chicken, Artie Lightfoot, Awesome Possum, Battletoads, Bubsy the Bobcat, Bucky O'Hare, and that's only the A's and B's, had already made their mark. Consulting an ever-shrinking list of ideas not yet used, Andy and Jason flipped through a book of Australian animals and took a liking to the wombat and bandicoot. Both were small, pointy-eared marsupials, similar in appearance. They had potential, they were real, but also obscure and unused. A placeholder name was given: Willie the Wombat. Universal arranged a meeting with animation artist Charles Zimbilius to turn wild animal Willie into a relatable character. Several designs were drafted, with a long back and forth between Charles, Naughty Dog, and Universal. The character required a range of facial expressions, with a body shape recognizable from all sides, including behind, all of which had to work within the limits of the PlayStation and look amazing on the TV. The final design on paper had Willie looking rather tall, with black bushy eyebrows, expressive eyes, and a huge grin. He wore jean shorts, gloves, and high-top shoes. He was also mostly orange and brown. Willie was made up of about 500 polygons in total, 2 or 3 times more than other games at the time. The high polygon count meant that his face, eyebrows, arms, and legs could have extra movement, more exaggerated features, and easier visibility on the screen throughout. The little triangles that formed his body were shaded different tones of orange. The color choices kept the image stable. Had the character featured stripes or even a tail, those things would flash or disappear while moving across the screen. Orange tones also helped contrast against backgrounds with different colors. Grasslands, deserts, and water levels all look great with an orange character running around. It allowed for almost any exotic locale, except volcanoes. Textures were used, but sparingly, mostly on the back, the point of view where the player would see Willy throughout most of the game. The high polygon count forced the action on screen to stay very tight. Many areas were narrow, short, and a little claustrophobic. It helped keep the polygon count from going over the limit the PlayStation allowed, most of which was taken up by Willy. All of the programming tricks were done by the staff Naughty Dog hired starting in 1995. Dave Baggett, a friend of Andy Gavin, was the first to come aboard. About a dozen more would join throughout the rest of the year and into 1996. With the technology finally in place, Naughty Dog could turn its attention to how Willy actually play. A simple control scheme was developed with only 2 actions in mind: jumping, which can defeat some enemies and is necessary to clear each level, and spinning, which breaks open crates, the item boxes found throughout every stage. This mechanic, and the sound it makes, gave Willy his true name, Crash. The game features a mix of playstyles. Many stages are in the standard third-person style, though things are meant to deviate from the fixed camera view, meaning Crash can be seen from all sides. Some levels are 2D side-scrolling, letting Crash be seen at an angle. Others are 3D with a front-facing view, where Crash runs towards the screen. The levels themselves are mostly linear. A few contain branching paths and bonus areas, but for the most part the goal is to get Crash from point A to point B. The game is divided into 3 islands, each containing multiple levels. After clearing enough of them, Crash goes one-on-one in a boss battle. Defeating the boss unlocks the next island, gradually leading towards the final confrontation. Throughout the game, Crash must find and destroy crates, wooden boxes that litter every level. Crates are one of the game's defining mechanics, and every crate serves a purpose. Standard crates contain Wumpa fruit. Collecting 100 of these earns 1 extra life. Arrow crates bounce Crash high into the air. TNT crates explode after a short countdown. Iron crates cannot be broken, while reinforced crates require multiple hits. Checkpoint crates save your progress within a stage. There are also question mark and exclamation point crates. Who can say what's in these crates? You just have to find out for yourself. Another style of crate awards Aku Aku masks. Crash is protected by Aku Aku, who takes the place of a traditional health meter. Each mask lets Crash survive 1 hit. 2 masks gives a little more protection. 3 masks gives Crash a short burst of invincibility. Each stage also contains a hidden challenge. If the player breaks every breakable crate in a level without losing a life, Crash earns a gem. Keys discovered in bonus rounds also unlock new areas of the game. All of this leads to earning a perfect 100% completion of the save file. That unlocks the true ending of the game, a feat reserved for only the best players. It was easy to see all of the hard work that went into Crash Bandicoot, but even the best looking games with the fastest action need a story. They need the good guy to have a foil, a bad guy to fight. What's the conflict? What's the motivation? The hero's raison d'etre. Where were we? Oh yes, a hero for our time. Now, Crash Bandicoot, although he was made, sort of, by the demented Dr. Cortex, he was dismissed as unworthy to be in the Doctor's growing army of animal-based soldiers. It seemed that Cortex had grander plans than Crash could fulfill. So he up and boots Crash off his main island and goes back to his schemes of world conquest. That was a very big mistake. It turns out that before Crash was ejected from the island fortress, he made an attachment to another one of Cortex's experiments, a wonderful she-bandicoot named Tawna. Crash is rather upset about being distanced from his new love, and he's going to prove just how wrong Dr. Cortex was in making a bandicoot, new and improved at that, as an enemy for life. Stick around for the fireworks. The fun is just starting.
Stop looking at me. wrong with these people? Never see a Bandicoot before?
The long road that began back in 1994 for Mark, Andy, and Jason came to fruition in May 1996 at that year's E3 Expo. Every E3 had something big and special planned for it, and in 1996, that was the Nintendo 64, which had been talked about for 3 years, and, after many delays, was finally coming to the US. Nintendo's stature and the curiosity over the machine and the Mario game that came with it dominated the conversation. But Sony had its 1-2 punch loaded in the chamber and ready to roll. In Sony's corner, Crash Bandicoot was shown off to the public at large for the first time. Though there were dozens of games on display, Crash quickly caught the attention of showgoers. Even the big man himself, Shigeru Miyamoto, was caught on camera playing Crash. Sony set the release date for Crash for September 9th, 1996, 1 year to the day when the whole PlayStation venture began in America, and a few weeks before the N64 would arrive. Sony made one more bold move. The PlayStation received a price cut to $199, effective immediately. The gaming media was keen to the idea of Crash as the face of the PlayStation. It was now Sonic versus Crash versus Mario. Electronic Gaming Monthly found it surprising that Crash seemed like another ho-hum platformer at first glance, but was shaping up to be the hottest new product of the year. Die Hard Game Fan called Crash gaming's newest superstar, with an unbelievable game that had the writing staff shocked that Sony was taking the reins of the action platforming genre, when so far the company had given off no intention of doing so. The response at and after E3 altered the course of Sony's image of the PlayStation for the rest of its life. Before September 1996, TV advertising for the PlayStation featured smash cuts of gameplay, without any announcers nor characters. The ads acted like Sony hijacked the airwaves with a secret message, escaping before getting caught. The audience didn't even see the PlayStation itself in them. It worked in securing an older audience, but with Crash Bandicoot going up against Super Mario 64, Sony was ready for a new direction.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Just weeks ahead of the American N64 debut, Sony kicked off an ad campaign where a man in a Crash Bandicoot suit brings the game to Nintendo's offices, screaming to the world with a giant megaphone until he is escorted away by security. Crash also appeared in ads for other Sony titles released at the same time, driving around in his truck full of TVs, talking to anyone willing to listen. The campaign was irreverent and hilarious, but also genius. What looked like an attack ad on the surface became much more nuanced as the campaign continued. Was Crash actually sent by Sony, or was this just an overzealous fan? Crash was turning off potential customers in the ads. His mission was failing more often than not. But viewers at home got the message. Later ads not featuring Crash maintained that strain of anti-advertising. In some ways, Sony picked up the tone of Sega's earlier campaigns, which the company had stepped back from with the Saturn. Reviews of the game followed the September 9th release of Crash. Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded Crash Bandicoot Game of the Month in October 1996. The review called Crash an excellent all-around title with a very cool character, and the best graphics of any PlayStation game so far. They were not as enthused about some levels, saying the game played like the original Mario and would not win any awards for originality. But running away from stone boulders, riding pigs, and breaking things makes Crash a fun game to play that should not be missed. Die Hard Game Fan also awarded Crash Bandicoot Game of the Month in October 96, with a score just 2 points shy of perfect. The Viewpoint crew said that Crash was a major turning point for the platform category, with the best graphics ever seen in a video game, with no pop-up and almost no pixels. They also praised the gameplay, saying it was reminiscent of old 8-bitters in difficulty and play mechanics. The reviewers wrapped things up by predicting that, come September 9th, a bunch of PlayStation owners are going to be very happy. In November, Crash headed over to the UK, Europe, and Australia, accompanied by a slightly different ad campaign. The man in the Crash suit was replaced by a more realistic news report of someone wearing an Aku Aku mask, running amok in a small town store. In these regions, the PlayStation was winning over the Saturn, in some cases by larger margins than in the US. Sony's lead would widen even further in PAL territories, as the N64 was delayed until March 1997. Reviews in the British gaming media were in line with those in the US, touching on Sony's desire to have more Mario-like games, as well as the sharp graphical presentation Crash had. The strong reception, even before release, prompted Sony to import Crash to Japan. Shuhei Yoshida, then a game producer within Sony, was chosen for the job, mainly because he spoke fluent English. Crash wasn't the first Western game brought across the sea. Sony had already had campaigns for games like Wipeout and Destruction Derby, promoting them with the term yoge, meaning overseas games. The term was often used in a derogatory manner, but Sony attempted to spin it into a positive, showing the land of the rising sun that great games could come from abroad. Crash Bandicoot did not follow this pattern. Instead, the game was tweaked to look and feel more Japanese. The team took a close look at anime, facial expressions, and studied what made Japanese game characters connect with fans. This led to Crash's appearance changing significantly. His mouth became smaller, his teeth less pronounced, and his hair slightly different. His eyes became bigger, but the pupils shrank at the same time. The gameplay and graphics ended up slightly different on screen as well. Several areas were redesigned, often to make pathways wider and a little easier to navigate. Save points were more frequent. There were more crates overall, with many placed in different locations. After discovering certain Aku Aku masks, game hints appeared on screen. The music was changed in a few places. TNT crates now have bombs on them. Wumpa fruit were simply called apples. In every region, the player could save progress to a memory card. In America, a password screen was included for those who didn't have one yet. In Japan, the password entry was removed, but you could bring it back by entering up, up, down, down, left, right, circle at the save screen. The biggest change might be relaxing the requirements for 100% completion. In the Japanese Crash, if you break any crates in a level, then lose a life, that crate count will carry over, meaning you don't need a perfect run to reach 100%. Is that good or bad? I guess it depends on how much challenge you want to handle. All of it made Crash in Japan a different game, ironically given the treatment that many games localized in English received. To gauge public reaction, Shuhei ordered 100,000 demo discs that featured about 30% of the full game and distributed them personally at PlayStation events across Japan in November '96. The engagement and feedback, especially with younger audiences, were enough to ensure confidence in Crash, both the character and the game. As the game went on sale in Japan on December 6, 1996, a new ad campaign reached the airwaves, with Crash and other characters from the game doing the Crash Dance, a set of funny dance moves designed to make Crash seem less intimidating to kids and more fun for everyone else. Later advertisements took a page out of the American marketing playbook as a guy in a Crash suit found himself in a variety of humorous situations, often with Parappa the Rapper serving as his sidekick. The gaming media in Japan weren't very taken by Crash Bandicoot. Famitsu issued a cross-review score of only 28 out of 40. Not the worst, but also not the best. The team commented that the game feels like a rearranged version of Donkey Kong Country, with the game relying heavily on its visuals, but also noted that the way the game captures the atmosphere of American-style entertainment is interesting, and with beautiful graphics and pleasant controls, succeeds as an action game. Crash Bandicoot debuted at number 6 on Famitsu's top 30 sales charts, a very impressive showing when considering that the Super Famicom remake of Dragon Quest III went on sale the same day. Crash stayed in the top 10 for several weeks and eventually sold over 500,000 units in Japan. In 1997, Sony issued Crash the Gold Prize for its sales achievement, an honor akin to earning a gold record in music. It was the first American-made PlayStation game to do so.
英雄クラッシュバンディクー誕生です。偉いから歌までできちゃいました。今度の 殺し役はこんなやつ 3D オクスクロールアクションクラッシュバンディクーしかも4発
PlayStation。
Crash Bandicoot was a smash hit, selling over 1 million copies around the world in 1996. But it didn't end there. In 1997, Naughty Dog followed up with Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back. After his defeat at the hands of Crash, Dr. Neo Cortex returns with a plan to restore the Cortex Vortex mind control device using powerful crystals. He tricks Crash into collecting the 25 crystals needed to power the machine, claiming that an upcoming planetary alignment could bring about the end of the world unless they're gathered. Crash's sister, Coco, and former Cortex assistant, Dr. Embryo, both attempt to reveal Cortex's true intentions before it's too late. Crash 2 used an all-new engine that Naughty Dog built specifically for this game. Crash 2 had even better graphics, with about twice as many polygons than before, with more frames of animation. The Crash dance was included to dovetail with the existing Japanese ad campaigns. Development began essentially the day Crash 1 was finished, and took a little over a year to complete. Universal spared no expense in hiring top talent. The music, sound effects, and voices were created by professional TV animation composers. Sales crossed the 800,000 mark in Japan, with 4 million lifetime sales around the world. Crash 3, formerly titled Crash Bandicoot Warped, followed in 1998. When the ruins of the Cortex Vortex fall to Earth, it frees Uka Uka, the evil twin brother of Aku Aku. Cortex and Dr. Nefarious Tropy recruit Uka Uka in gathering crystals from different eras in history in order to conquer the Earth. It's up to Crash and Coco to retrieve the crystals from places like the Great Wall of China and Route 66 in order to save the world. Behind the scenes, the same core team of talent at Naughty Dog and Universal worked together to finish the game in just under 11 months, giving fans 3 Crash games in 3 years. Warped was praised for having some of the best graphics ever on the PlayStation, both in 1998 and in retrospect. Sales surpassed 6 million worldwide, with over 1 million sold in Japan. The first American-made game to receive the Platinum Prize from Sony. That version also supported the Pocket Station, a memory card with an LCD screen that never left Japan. While in the US, Crash 3 was featured on the famous Pizza Hut demo disc that literally everyone you knew back then had. And as a capstone to an amazing trilogy and impressive run, Crash received one of the greatest honors not long afterwards, with his likeness receiving a parody in The Simpsons, a true sign that someone or something has made it.
Fine, I'm sick of this stupid game anyway.
There is a case to be made that the Crash series isn't simply a derivative of Mario and has enough originality to stand on its own. But much like Mega Man Battle and Chase, Chocobo Racing, Sonic R, Nicktoons Racing, Konami Crazy Racers, Diddy Kong Racing, Charinko Hero, and God knows what else, Crash Team Racing, released in 1999, is basically Crash's Mario Kart. That doesn't mean there weren't plenty of challenging courses, unique power-ups, and ideas of its own. The adventure mode gave the game a central story, where Crash must save the world from the evil alien nitrous oxide. By 2000, the agreement between Universal Interactive Studios and Naughty Dog had ended. Universal became part of Vivendi Games, a French media company, which eventually renamed itself to Vivendi Universal Games. Regardless of the corporate name, the important takeaway is that Sony lost control of their main character, which they never actually owned. Other developers were hired to make later Crash games, which then also appeared on Nintendo and Microsoft hardware, beginning in 2002 with the Huge Adventure on the Game Boy Advance and a port of The Wrath of Cortex on Xbox and GameCube. More sequels followed, along with additional racing games, and even a few Mario Party-style outings. Many fans felt that without Naughty Dog developing the series, and without PlayStation exclusivity, Crash and his games no longer had the shine that they had in the 90s. Sony acquired Naughty Dog in 2001. Having that Sony bankroll helped the developer stay solvent as game production costs continued to rise as the world moved on to the PlayStation 2, where Andy and Jason debuted a new franchise with Jak and Daxter. an adventure where the human, Jack, sets out on a quest to reverse the transformation of his friend Daxter, who became something resembling a weasel or an otter. With more advanced graphics on the PlayStation 2 and a human lead, the look was less cartoonish and took itself a little more seriously. The gameplay features exploration of exotic locales, mostly from a third-person perspective, while on the hunt for power cells as an in-game objective. Jak and Daxter was praised for its open and seamless 3D world, without individual stages that lack load times. The series, also like Crash, had 3 games released all in a row, followed by its own requisite racer. By the conclusion of the Jak and Daxter trilogy, Andy and Jason left the company they founded to pursue other interests, sometimes in gaming, sometimes not. Sony restaffed Naughty Dog and the company continued on with newer series that had more realism to them, namely Uncharted and The Last of Us. Games from these series received worldwide acclaim, with Japanese reviews offering some of the highest scores of the generation. That long trail from 1996 to the present saw the rise of many game studios in the US and the rest of the world beyond Japan. Encouraged and inspired by those early successes seen on the PS1, games like Ratchet & Clank, Spyro the Dragon, and even Grand Theft Auto gained respect among Japanese gamers, even if for some, it wasn't their cup of tea. The term yoge still exists, but no longer has a negative connotation. It's more like how the word anime is used in the Anglosphere to describe a certain style from a specific place. Shuhei Yoshida and Mark Cerny remained close after their time with Crash Bandicoot had ended. Shuhei climbed the corporate ladder ranks during PlayStation 2 development and brought Mark in as a consultant. Together, they worked on fine-tuning graphic engines based on feedback and experiences from their time working with Crash as well as other games. Together, the two would later work on the PlayStation 3, 4, 5, and the Vita. I've also heard Mark moonlights as Dana Carvey's stunt double, but those rumors are unconfirmed. And as for Crash Bandicoot today, well, it's complicated. Vivendi Universal was eventually merged with Activision. I loved all their Atari games, by the way, operating under the name Activision Blizzard, only to be bought by Microsoft in 2023 as part of a $68 billion deal, where Crash is now one of hundreds of properties that sit in a vault in Redmond, Washington, not that far away from where Crash once blared his message to the world in simpler, happier times. But in the middle of all that, Crash was revived in 2017 with the Insane Trilogy, remastering the original 3 PS1 games and bringing them into the modern day in one collection. Even the man in the Crash suit came back for one more go. It was just like old times. The trilogy was immensely popular, eventually passing 20 million units sold across all platforms. It all led to a proper sequel, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, in 2020, which received mostly positive reviews and surpassed 5 million in sales. Back when Crash Bandicoot was first shown off at E3 1996, nobody could have predicted the impact it and everyone involved would have on the world of video games. So much that if a time traveler from 1996 saw a retail box for a Japanese Nintendo Switch game starring Crash Bandicoot, published by Sega, he could only ask himself, just what timeline have I stumbled upon?
時代は今、クラッシュバンディクー。さあ、皆さんご一緒に。予想以上に大好評。クラッシュバンディクー、しかも4パッチ。
PlayStation.
"1996 was a pivotal year for video games. Looking back years later, it's easy to condense some of them down into a simple explanation. Super Mario 64 set the standard for 3D action gaming. Nights into Dreams showed that the Saturn did have the right stuff after all. But Crash Bandicoot? Not so simple. It gave us Sony's mascot? Yes, but that's no longer the case. It revolutionized the genre? No. Crash was a well-made game, but it was actually one of the last major platformers that wasn't a free-roaming 3D game with camera control. It also wasn't the best-selling or highest-rated PlayStation game of that year. But keep in mind that even in 1996, the PlayStation was already an embarrassment of riches. Instead, it was the long tail of events that stemmed from Crash that stands as its real legacy. The success Crash had helped jumpstart American video game development. It already existed, especially on the PC, but bringing that to the PlayStation created so much more opportunity that everyone wanted in. It gave players at home more choices, which gave developers higher sales, which could then be invested into making even more games, letting the cycle snowball. Having great games created within cultural contexts that were easily understood made the market bigger. Gone were the days when Nobunaga's ambition was simply thrown out there to middle America. And even if all you prefer are weird, level-grinding games full of text, I would argue you benefited from this change too. When you've got other games selling millions of copies, it's much easier for a publisher to say, okay, we're making enough money. Go ahead and print 200,000 copies of that obscure import. Even if it bombs, we can eat the loss. You can't do that when a niche game is your only moneymaker. In Japan, Western games on store shelves are no longer a rare sighting. Also noteworthy is that this didn't happen by accident. Sony embraced the idea of Western-developed games and invested heavily in them. Crash and many of the games that followed didn't just appear in Japan by chance. They were developed with worldwide audiences in mind, then carefully localized for each region. That's the reason the PlayStation went on to sell over 100 million units worldwide, a number that was historic 25 years ago, but now stands as the baseline for success. That's the legacy of Crash Bandicoot, something much bigger than the game itself, especially now when the glory days are long over. It's the road that Crash helped lay down way back when, that we're all still walking on today.